heart of your system.
Hi guys, it's Silas for Kit Guru, and today we are taking a look at the Edifier S70DB SoundBar. So let's start with the basics. The Edifier S70DB kit comprises of the soundbar itself and a separate subwoofer for an RRP of £449.99. In the rather large box we have the soundbar, subwoofer, a remote control and a series of cables. A fibre optic audio, 3.5mm to RCA, 3.5mm audio adapter cable and a power cable for the subwoofer. This should cover all the bases when it comes to connecting the S70DB up to your TV. Also included a wall mount for the soundbar, screws and raw plugs, which is nice to see. Considering the number of users I would imagine are connecting the S70DB up to a wall mounted TV. First impressions are really positive. The aesthetic may not be for everybody, but I really like the wood finish. The soundbar and subwoofer are built from MDF with the wooden finish as a veneer. I really like the darker wood, but this being said, it may not be for everybody, as considering this is the only colourway for the S70DB kit, you may be at a bit of a loss if you wanted all black, for instance. Once out the box, setting everything up was actually surprisingly easy. What's really cool is that the speaker bar and subwoofer connect wirelessly, so you only need to run a single cable from the speaker bar to your TV. There are power cables though for both the soundbar and the subwoofer, and in order to get the speaker bar and subwoofer to talk to each other, there is a simple pairing procedure required by depressing two buttons, one on each of the speakers. It's quick and simple, and although it did require a consultation of the manual, was pretty much just as fast as running a cable. The only element I did have a bit of trouble with during setup is actually that I couldn't fit the S70DB soundbar on my existing TV stand. At 113cm long and 13cm deep for the soundbar, it is certainly worth making sure you have the space to sit it in front of your TV if it's not wall mounted. The sub was a little bit easier, and I positioned just under my newly rigged TV table stand. As the sub is wireless, you shouldn't have much trouble finding space for it, and it's basically a 32cm cube. In terms of connections available, you have optical in, coaxial, RCA line in, aux on the soundbar itself. The sub is pretty simple by comparison and has no additional connections, just controls for bass adjustment, a power switch and a status indicator and pairing button. My TV supports optical out, so I use this as my preferred connection type. This seemed like the simplest option, as any further HDMI connected devices should still run through the soundbar without lots of switching between different connection types each time you wanted to change the source. Initially there was a lot of ghosted audio coming through both the TV speakers and the S70DB. Turning the volume off completely from the TV did remedy this, but upon delving into TV settings, there was an option for simply disabling the inbuilt speakers and have all the audio played through the optical out instead. It is definitely worth checking this is possible with your TV, and this is by no means an issue with the S70DB, but initially, without browsing some settings, I was stuck with a mute icon constantly showing on my TV, which is a little bit intrusive. The front fabric grills can be removed from both the speaker bar and the sub, which is cool to see. Not only is this super easy to remove these grills, great for me to help provide a better view of the speaker array, but also down the line if cleaning is required. With the grills off, you get a much better view of the four 70mm aluminium mid-range bass amplifiers and two 19mm titanium film dome tweeters, separated three aside from left to right in stereo. The sub is an 8-inch unit, and you get a total of 158 watts from the S70DB, which should be easily enough to power most home cinema setups. The grills are removable, but it doesn't look like the soundbar is intended to be used without these covers, as they sit flush to the rest of the speaker. Aesthetically, to me, it doesn't look great with these covers removed, but it's really cool that there is the potential to remove them for cleaning if required, or if they need to be replaced, say if they get damaged. Overall, the build quality is outstanding. Super solid all around with a ton of reassuring weight. The soundbar comes in at about 5.5 kilos and around 11 for the subwoofer. The soundbar itself sits upon two really chunky rubberized feet, which certainly helps with stability. The grills and remote are really the only part I can see you having issues with, but again, being unattached means replacing them is relatively easy. The front of the soundbar follows a super simple aesthetic, which I actually really like, and the only control present is a simple dial for controlling volume. The dial itself is nice and chunky, and there are significant tactile bumps as you move up and down in volume. The remote itself is pretty cool. In shape, it's round and puck-like and feels really good in the hand. The somewhat unusual shape is also appreciated though, as it makes it very easy to distinguish against other media center or TV remotes. One thing to note is that the remote requires a relatively standard CR2025 cell battery, but a little less convenient to swap out than the more mainstream AA and AAA batteries that most TV remotes will work with. The remote itself is pretty self-explanatory and easy to use. There are standard controls for volume up and down, input selection and play pause, previous and next track. A really cool feature of the S70DB is the support for Bluetooth 4.1, and this is the primary reason for the inclusion of the media controls, as when just being used connected to your TV as a soundbar, these controls don't really do anything except for the play pause button, which functions as mute. The inclusion of Bluetooth connectivity is great, as initially the £449 price point struck me as quite a bit to be spending on just better TV audio. Being able to wirelessly connect your Bluetooth enabled devices and use the S70DB as your primary go-to for living room audio as well is a big plus point and makes the dearer price a lot easier to swallow. Bluetooth for me worked well, and I was able to achieve around 10 meters of range without the audio starting to cut out. This did include a wall or two, so your mileage may vary, but this is easily enough range to cover your living room. The S70DB also supports high-res audio, so for those with a large collection of lossless audio in formats like WAV or FLAC, you are covered. The sound quality itself is really impressive, and a massive upgrade over my TV's built-in speaker setup. Overall, the S70DB offered much better balance across the board, and whereas my standard TV speakers had sounded a little bit tinny, the S70DB delivered much more clarity with heavy dialogue. The mid and low ranges really shone through though, and this is the big improvement I found for the S70DB over my normal TV speakers. This is typically an area I find to be lacking with inbuilt speaker setups, especially bass, but even with the sub disconnected, the soundbar itself still excelled in providing much richer sound. The sub aided massively when watching movies. The expected rumbling commonly associated with subwoofers helped with immersion and was great during even recent World Cup matches. Being more specifically tuned to TV use and a much wider range of sound makes a lot more sense, and I had a really hard time discerning areas where any detail or clarity was lost. Overall very balanced and very clear, and almost no distortion even at max volumes. The bass does become pretty intense at this point though, and max volume is unnecessary unless you plan just to irritate your neighbours. The preset effects like news, movie and music are quite subtle but works very well for their expected applications. For most programs and general TV, I kept the S70DB in news mode, which offered more vocal clarity, much better for long dialogue sequences or say sports commentary. Movie really upped the rumbling bass and offered a great cinematic experience. I did pick up on more vibration running through the floors of my living room, but dialogue still came through clear and easy to follow. Music is kind of what you might expect, a bit of a balance between the two, cutting back on the bass a little and a bit more of a general listening mode. You do still have the flexibility to adjust the amount of bass using the dial at the rear of the sub. It's also nice to see that the dial has a small tactile bump at its midway point, which makes adjusting the bass a lot easier when reaching around to the rear of the subwoofer. I preferred to stick with the midway point in a lot of my testing, as it genuinely was the most balanced option. Increasing the bass to full was very noticeable and actually a little too much for my preferences, but this again is pretty subjective. I will admit it's a bit of a shame only having just the 3 modes for adjusting EQ settings. I would have really preferred some options for setting up custom profiles or editing these presets a little more. This wasn't so much of an issue when using alongside just my TV, but I couldn't help feeling this was a bit of a missed opportunity for those who truly want to utilise the S70DB as a living room speaker setup. Overall, I was really impressed with the Edifier S70DB SoundBar. A significant improvement over standard TV audio, which is to be expected, but the added connections and inclusion of Bluetooth had me impressed with its versatility, and alongside using the S70DB with just my TV, I actually found myself using it just as much for general music consumption, even more so than my non-Bluetooth equipped stereo setup. The setup was nice and easy, and the inclusion of things like the wall mount bracket, along with screws and even raw plugs to set it up, is nice to see, showing Edifier really tried to simplify the whole setup process. It's not the best as a standalone stereo. Improvements could be made with the flexibility of EQ options, or even just more modes, but as an option that covers these bases, both connected to your TV and for an occasional music playback device, it works really well. If you're looking for something primarily for music, you probably wouldn't be looking at a soundbar anyway. It's very well built and looks great too, so definitely more of a feature of your living room. But in terms of recommendation, there is a caveat, and to me it basically comes down to how much you would spend on your TV in the first place. I picked up my 4K TV as part of a Black Friday deal around £350, so it's unlikely that I'd be looking in the £400 to £500 price category for a soundbar. At £449.99, it's more of an enthusiast class of product, and the audio quality definitely lives up to this. It may not be for everyone, but for those looking to dramatically improve their viewing experience through better audio and more immersive bass, the Edifier S70DB is definitely worth a look. So make sure you like this video if you liked it, and don't forget to hit subscribe for future videos. If you don't want to miss the next video, feel free to click the bell icon below for notifications of new video releases from Kit Guru. I've been Silas for Kit Guru, and I will see you in the next one.